In the golden age of Italian automotive excellence, two titans would clash in a rivalry so fierce, so deeply personal, that it would reshape the very definition of the supercar and change the course of automotive history forever. On one side, Enzo Ferrari, the commander, a man whose very name became synonymous with racing perfection. Born in Modena, forged on the racetrack, Enzo had spent his entire life chasing victory and demanding the same from everyone around him. Ferrari wasn't just a car company, it was a religion, a creed built on speed, sacrifice, and an absolute refusal to compromise. And Enzo? He was its unforgiving god. On the other side, Ferruccio Lamborghini, the tractor tycoon, a self-made industrialist who had built his fortune not on the racetrack, but in the fields of the Po Valley. While Enzo wore his aristocratic reputation like a crown, Ferruccio had earned every lira with his hands, building engines, running factories, solving problems that other men called impossible. Where Ferrari saw himself as nobility, Ferruccio saw himself as a craftsman, and craftsmen, he believed, always found a way. But in 1963, these two worlds would collide in the most explosive way possible. Not on a racetrack, not in a boardroom, in the parking lot of a Ferrari dealership, over a broken clutch. Because sometimes the greatest innovations in history come not from friendship, not from collaboration, not from shared ambition, but from the deepest, most personal insults a man can receive. It started, as so many great stories do, with a simple problem. Ferruccio Lamborghini owned a Ferrari 250 GT, a beautiful machine, low, sleek, and intoxicating in the way only an Italian sports car of that era could be, but like all mechanical things, it wasn't perfect. The clutch kept failing, grinding, slipping at the worst possible moments. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was embarrassing for a man who built transmissions for a living. So Ferruccio did what any reasonable car enthusiast would do. He took it back to the dealer. He expected a fix. What he got was something else entirely. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Ferruccio wasn't just a wealthy customer with a complaint. He was a trained engineer who had spent decades designing and building mechanical systems far more complex than a sports car clutch. He knew exactly what the problem was, and he knew exactly how to fix it. So when he suggested, politely and professionally, to Enzo Ferrari himself that perhaps there was a design flaw in the clutch mechanism, he expected a technical conversation, a discussion between equals. The response, however, wasn't professional discussion. It was pure, aristocratic contempt. "You make tractors," Enzo reportedly sneered, his voice dripping with the quiet disdain of a man who had never once doubted his own superiority. "You know nothing about sports cars." He paused, just long enough to let the words land like a blade. "Stick to your farm machinery." There was no debate, no technical counter-argument, no acknowledgement that the man standing before him had built an industrial empire from scratch. Just dismissal. Cold, complete, and absolute. 5 words that would cost Enzo Ferrari everything. Those words hit Ferruccio like a sledgehammer, not because they were delivered with anger, but because they weren't. Enzo didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply decided in that moment that Ferruccio Lamborghini was beneath his attention. Here was a man who had built an empire from nothing, who had survived the war, rebuilt Italy's agricultural infrastructure, and created one of the most respected mechanical brands in the country, being dismissed in 5 seconds by someone who had inherited his identity from a racetrack and never once questioned it. The humiliation was total, and it was permanent. And in that moment, something irreversible happened. A monster was born. Because Ferruccio Lamborghini made a decision, quiet, cold, and absolute that would haunt Enzo Ferrari for the rest of his days. He decided to build his own sports car. Ferruccio didn't just want to prove a point. He wanted to build something better, something that would make Enzo Ferrari regret every word of that dismissal. If Ferrari was the king of the racetrack, then Lamborghini would be the god of the open road, where Ferrari built race cars barely tamed for the street. Loud, unforgiving, demanding, Ferruccio wanted something else entirely. A true grand tourer. Fast, comfortable, civilized, a car that didn't punish you for driving it. He started by doing what Enzo never expected and never would have done himself. He hired the best people in Italy. Not loyalty appointments, not old friends, the best. Engineers who had worked inside Ferrari's own walls and knew exactly where the gaps were. Designers from the most respected studios in the country. Young, hungry minds who were tired of Enzo's ego and ready, desperate even, to build something the world hadn't seen yet. At the heart of Ferruccio's vision was a philosophy so simple, it was almost radical. A sports car should not punish you. It should thrill you. Powerful, yes, but also refined. Precise, but not brutal. Fast, but not frantic. A machine built for the wealthy industrialist, not just the professional race driver. A car you could drive flat out from Bologna to Rome in the summer heat and step out of on the other side without feeling broken. In 1964, Lamborghini unveiled the 350 GT Elegant, smooth, and more sophisticated than anyone had a right to expect from a first attempt. A statement, direct and unmistakable, that this so-called tractor maker could play in Ferrari's world with genuine grace. The 350 GT didn't dethrone Ferrari. It didn't need to. Instead, it did something far more dangerous. It forced the automotive world to take Ferruccio Lamborghini seriously. It proved that this wasn't a vanity project, not a rich man's tantrum dressed up in bodywork. It was the opening move in a war, calculated, confident, backed by real engineering talent. And Enzo Ferrari, watching from his throne in Maranello, now understood something deeply uncomfortable. He had a rival. Not a competitor to be brushed off, a rival with money, with talent, with a personal grudge, and absolutely nothing to lose. But the real turning point, the moment when this rivalry stopped being a business story and became something closer to legend, came with a car that, at first, Enzo didn't even take seriously. A skunkworks project. A group of young Lamborghini engineers, working almost in secret, asked themselves a single dangerous question. What if we ignored every rule about what a road car was supposed to be? A radical experiment. A prototype that looked more like a spaceship than a grand tourer. A car that would redefine permanently what a road-legal machine could be. It was called the Miura, mid-engined, low, wide. Aggressive in a way that felt almost biological, like something evolved purely to go fast. Built not as a polite grand tourer, but as a rolling piece of rebellion. Its V12 sat transversely behind the driver, like a Le Mans prototype handed a license plate. Its body lines were so extreme, so unapologetically shocking, that people genuinely didn't know whether to call it beautiful or insane. When the Miura was shown to the world in the late 1960s, it didn't just challenge Ferrari. It made Ferrari look old, conservative, safe, in a way that suddenly felt like a criticism. Overnight, it was Lamborghini that represented the future. Danger, excess. The idea that speed was a lifestyle choice, a statement of identity, a declaration of who you were and what you refused to accept about the ordinary world. Ferruccio hadn't just answered Enzo's insult, he had done something far greater. He'd built a new kind of dream, one that didn't exist before he decided in a parking lot that he'd been humiliated for the last time. For the first time, the the wealthiest playboys and movie stars of Europe had a genuine choice: worship at the altar of the established god of speed, or pledge yourself to the wild new deity born entirely out of spite. And in that moment, the rivalry stopped being personal and became something much bigger. It became a war for the soul of the supercar itself. By the early 1970s, it looked like Ferruccio Lamborghini had done the impossible. He had gone from tractor maker, a title meant as an insult, to the man behind the wildest, most desirable supercars on the planet. The Miura had turned heads at every motor show in Europe. The Countach concept looked like it came from another dimension: angular, aggressive, a shape so extreme it still doesn't look like anything else on the road. But while the battle for speed and style raged on, something far bigger was brewing in the background, something neither Enzo nor Ferruccio could out-engineer. In October 1973, the Arab oil embargo hit the Western world like a hammer. Fuel prices spiked, lines formed at gas stations, rationing began, and almost overnight, the conversation shifted from performance to survival, from extravagance to efficiency. Overnight, the supercar went from symbol of the future to symbol of everything wrong with the present. The very thing Lamborghini and Ferrari had built their identities on, power, noise, wasteful speed, was now politically toxic and economically indefensible. Governments began talking openly about speed limits and fuel mandates. For most people, a 12-cylinder sports car wasn't just impractical anymore, it was offensive. Ferruccio, unlike Enzo, had never been consumed by racing glory. He was a businessman, pragmatic, disciplined, and unsentimental when the numbers stopped making sense. And now they had. His industrial operations were under pressure. His car company had become a financial burden he could no longer carry. The math was simple, the emotion was not. In the mid-1970s, Ferruccio did something that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. He walked away, quietly, without drama. He sold his remaining shares in the company that bore his name, the company built from nothing, from spite, from a single burning desire to prove one arrogant man wrong. The man who had built a god out of humiliation left the temple behind. Enzo Ferrari, meanwhile, pushed on, because pushing on was the only thing Enzo Ferrari knew how to do. Ferrari weathered the crisis better, thanks to its racing heritage and deeper reserves. But even in Maranello, the storm left its mark. Emissions rules tightened. Engines were strangled by regulations written for mass-market cars. The wild, free-breathing era of unrestrained Italian horsepower, the era these two men had defined, was quietly, irreversibly over. Both brands survived, but neither emerged unchanged. Lamborghini, without its founder, passed through several owners, each struggling to keep the dream alive through recessions and a market no longer certain about anything. The Countach, born as an outrageous vision of tomorrow, spent years compromised by regulations and costs. Ferrari's road cars grew more cautious because caution, for the first time in either company's history, had become a virtue. And yet the rivalry itself became the one thing that couldn't die. Even as the men who started it aged and passed away, Ferruccio in 1993, Enzo in 1988, the names they built refused to diminish. Ferrari and Lamborghini stopped belonging to any one person. They became archetypes, ideologies, two opposing answers to the same eternal question: what should the ultimate car be? Ferrari became the answer for those who believed a great car should earn your respect, disciplined, race-bred, every detail justified by lap times and trophies, heritage as religion, which is exactly what Enzo always intended. Lamborghini became the answer for those who believed a great car should demand your attention. Brutal, theatrical, a rolling provocation. One name promised legitimacy, the other promised rebellion. And all of it. Every decade of obsession, every billion spent, every poster on a bedroom wall, every dream in the mind of a child staring at a photograph, traces back to one moment. One afternoon in Maranello, one conversation under a minute long, one clash between a proud craftsman and an aristocrat who made the catastrophic mistake of underestimating him. Enzo told Ferruccio to stick to tractors. It was meant to close the door on a presumptuous factory owner. Instead, it opened one. Ferruccio went home and started making calls. He built not just a car company, but a lifelong rival that would stand beside Ferrari on every street, at every motor show, in every generation's argument about what the ultimate car should look like. Because in the end, this was never really about cars. It was about pride, the kind that builds empires and the kind that burns them down. About who gets to define perfection and what happens when someone you dismissed refuses to accept that verdict. About the cost of arrogance and the strange power of humiliation when it lands on exactly the right person. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is tell a genius they don't belong. If you want more insane stories about business and history, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss our next video. Thanks for watching.